Terrain. In Dungeons and Dragons and many other war games like Warhammer, it can affect the mechanics of the game. It can provide cover. It can provide places for enemies to pop out of. But it can also help with the storytelling of what's happening on the table. In this video, I'm going to show you some pieces that I made to help instill a sense of dread in two very different ways. Well, what happened to this here toy dinosaur? I don't know. I can only assume two things, a dog attack, or more likely, given the absolute destruction, probably getting run over by a lawnmower. Considering that there's a complete slice taken out of the tough plastic, I am just assuming lawnmower. Despite being found at the Goodwill by the pound, this is not the end for our dinosaur friend. He will live on as part of my Dungeons and Dragons terrain. I also used some of the little bone anatomical model thing that I found at the Goodwill by the pound as well as part of the neck bone. And there we have it, the main portion of this almost ready-made death marker. The dinosaur death marker. I needed to get a nice little base done, and so Sculpt-A-Mold is the cheapest, easiest way to do that. If you've not used Sculpt-A-Mold before, it's somewhat similar to like very sticky paper mache with a resin in it as well. So it's like sawdust and like glue and resin type material. It takes a very long time to dry, but when it does, it dries pretty tough. Sculpt-A-Mold is just mixed with water, and then you can use a little bit more water to smooth it out as much as you like. Generally speaking, I do a pretty good job with this. This was sort of just a quick project, so I really just wanted to make sure that this sort of looked like a severed head that was embedded into the dirt. So I didn't clean it up as much as possible. Like I said, when you use Sculpt-A-Mold, you just mix it with water, and it has various parts during the drying process when you can smooth it out a little bit more. I was pretty happy with the result. You can see here I was actually doing a little bit of smoothing on some of the edges there. So yeah. So the second part of this dreadful terrain project was inspired by Elden Ring, and specifically the Root Burial Chamber. When I played Elden Ring, I thought this really stuck out as just being incredibly unnerving. So I thought it'd be really cool to have some terrain that I could use in my D&D game that would be similar. Now, this was basically a bunch of green stuff sculpts that I sculpted and then duplicated with Oyumaru with press molds, and then I sort of attached them all on this bit of stump toy that I found at the Goodwill by the pound. So this is all my own little sculptures, just sort of all added together. And I could have just went with one piece of terrain, but I did have some cheap mold making material from Amazon that I wanted to test out. And so what better project to test that out on? Now, with my previous project where I used this system of lots of tiny little parts, I used a healthy covering of Mod Podge, and I should have done that a little bit more because some of these parts didn't turn out too great in the mold because there's just too many little holes and whatnot. But overall, it works for this project because at the end thing, the little bubbles and stuff, they bother me a little bit, but it doesn't look that bad on the finished product. I screwed up a bunch of steps. You'll notice I'm using a slightly porous container for my mold making thing here. If I would have added a little bit of Vaseline to the sides in the bottom of this container, it would have been fine. But I did not do that, and so it was a little bit difficult to demold this because the mold material will kind of hook into all that little texture there. So generally, I make sure my molds are made from some sort of non-porous material, like Legos. You can make mold boxes out of Legos, and those always work great. But yeah, this would have worked fine if I would have, done something with the sides with Vaseline or something like that. Also, I probably would have had less bubbles had I simply used a I use a power drill to sort of shake up the mold before it's, too far into the curing process. This was about 8 hours later. I was able to demold it, and it worked out pretty good considering how many little bits and pieces were sort of loose on this thing. I was actually surprised that nothing got ripped off, but again, I did have issues with bubbles, I did have issues with like too many gaps and stuff, but at the end of the day, I don't think it really matters too much. This is, again, more learning process for me. Using some inexpensive hobby store resin here. Again, I probably should have been wearing gloves, though I was being very careful. Resin does that thing where you pour in equal parts and it turns opaque and then it turns clear again, giving you your sign that you have your very short window to pour it into the molds. So yeah, always in a well-ventilated room, always wear eye protection when you're doing resin stuff like this. Again, I could have used the power drill to shake the mold while I was pouring it in. I was just kind of giving it a little shimmy, which worked out okay, but again, I think like some sort of vibration thing would have been a little bit better. But overall, I was happy enough with the final result. So, and what you're seeing there for the other molds is just some other random molds, so I'm not wasting resin at the end of the day. Pouring in a little bit by bit, and then making sure the rest of the resin is poured in for other base molds and stuff like that 600 times to see that resin turn from clear to white as it heats up and cures. And while I was waiting for that to cure, I painted up the base with some paint-on primer with some Mecha primer. Some nice brown primer there for the dirt. That way it kind of skips a step. That way you don't have to, this is basically a one-step solution, frankly. It might be a bit of a waste of that good Mecha primer for something like this, but I have some old stuff, and if you don't use it, then you're going to lose it. Demolding my thing very carefully, stretching it out, and then finally popping it out to get the entire thing, and boom, there you go. A complete duplicate. As you can see there are some bits of ripped out mold. That is what happens when you try to do a one-part mold for something this complicated, and already you can see the bubbles. But again, didn't work out too bad, gotta say. And there you have it, all painted up. I will link the painting process below. It involved just basically a bunch of washes, a bunch of purple, red, orange, and parchment-colored washes, some dry brushes. There's my previous project that I first tested this on. I'll note that does not have custom sculpts. That's all kind of like copied from other miniatures. But these two are 100% original miniatures, though. These are all custom sculpts on the base there, and then the little end with the kind of DIY quick and dirty glue gun texture there. That worked out pretty good. They look very gross and very disgusting, and they definitely have the feel of the Darks. They have the feel of Dark Souls, but they also have the feel of the Elden Ring style terrain without being a direct ripoff. And then there you have my other thing that I finished painting in that same stream. You see a couple dots of some textured debris there mixed in, just to give it a little bit different. But now that is a depth marker. That is how you tell your players in D&D that there is a massive creature out there that is very, very dangerous, and they should take precautions. That's one way of doing it, for sure. Well, there you have it. Perhaps some of the most grim and violent terrain that I've ever created. Perhaps that's at odds with my latest project of doing voiceover stuff for comics. But if you want to know any specifics about the techniques that I used in this crafting video, let me know in the comments below. And speaking of all the voice acting I've been doing as an amateur, if you want me to voice act anything, also let me know in the comments if there's any like quick little thing you think would be fun for me to do a voice acting thing about. If you want to check out my second channel, I've been doing a lot of Warhammer voice over things over there. Let me know in the comments below.
What can I say? I was hungry.